Hello. Hi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to our day 2 of the IT Audit Masterclass. My name is Bernard Wanyama from ISACA Kampala chapter, and I'm delighted to have all of you in the house this evening. We shall start in about a minute as our participants get in. We encourage you today to have more engagement. Let us ask more questions in the Q&A. Let us focus on the presenter's material. We shall have a lot of experts on the panel tackling the questions in the Q&A so that we have an overall productive session. So let's give it 1 minute before I start to call upon our presenters of the day. Thank you. So good evening once again, good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. You're welcome to day 2 of our IT Audit Masterclass. I'm Bernard Wanyama from ISACA Kampala chapter, and I'm delighted to be your host this evening. Our trainers today are none other than Mr. Peter Wajekunle, who is the Senior Manager Risk and Assurance at PwC Uganda, together with Christine Senior Adania, who is a Senior Associate at PwC Uganda, and they will be delivering our training this evening. We encourage you to post questions in the Q&A. They will be tackled by the panel of experts that we have behind the scenes, myself, Rita Kobusinge, and Kefa Tusubira. We would like you to keep engaging us in the Q&A as the training goes on, and also bear with us given that we have very little time to deliver this. So without wasting much time, I'd like to invite Peter to take on the session. Peter, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Bernard. And again, good morning or afternoon or evening to you, wherever you listen to me from. Bernard, quite interesting that you're one of the few people in Uganda that have been able to pronounce my surname properly. So probably you need a gift for that. Yeah. So thank you very much again for giving us the opportunity to do this. And I really hope that the session yesterday was insightful to give you at least a base or a foundation to pick up from wherever you are in your career, whether you're starting or you're already into it. So hopefully we're also able to pick up from where we left off yesterday, and make it as interesting as possible. Yeah. So maybe just as a recap, given that some of you have had a long day, you of course had to sleep off what you had learned yesterday. It's just important that we do a very quick sense check, or yeah, just to be sure that you're still on course with what we talked about yesterday. So I'm going to request Rita to launch the first set of poll questions, and hopefully you were here yesterday. And then after we have covered that, then I will try and bring it all together in terms of what we covered in the next 2 to 3 minutes, after which I will hand over to our excellent facilitator, Christine Senior Adania, to take over. Okay, so we've got the first poll question in there. What are the 4 domains under IT general controls? And I think we looked at that yesterday. Yeah. So we have some options, 4 of them. Happy for you to go through very quickly and make a choice. We have about 143 people connected. So I really encourage everyone to participate in this. At least that gives us some sort of feedback that we're not doing many other things along with the webinar. Yeah. Okay. I'm also going to post my own question or my own response. Okay. Rita, I don't know if it's just me, but it looks like these are not presented as radio buttons.
Peter, I think we have a technical issue with the poll, so I think we can skip.
Okay, let's proceed. Wow, yes, thank you, Bernard. Let's proceed.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we will proceed while Rita tries to sort that out. Okay. All right. So yesterday we had Christine do a fantastic job just covering some aspects of the entire curriculum yesterday. She started by giving us a very in-depth overview of the basics and fundamentals of auditing. And I recall that she touched on quite a bit of areas, different risk concepts, from inherent risk to control risk to residual risk to detection risk. And then she went into different concepts associated or surrounding controls, whether it is in terms of design effectiveness or operating effectiveness. And then she also talked about concepts of sampling, concepts of gathering sufficient evidence. I also recall she talked about computer-aided audit techniques, CAT, which in today's world has very easily transitioned to the use of robotics, RPA, combined very beautifully with data analytics and business intelligence, just to make, presentation of audit findings a bit more insightful, not just for the technical people, but now for senior management, board of directors, etc. Quite a bit in there around basics and the fundamentals, looking at the entire audit cycle, from planning to execution and then reporting, and the things that you need to take in mind in each of the stages: planning, understanding the entity, understanding the auditee and what they do, understanding the supporting technology and systems that are in scope, and then using that as a basis to draw up your risk assessment, and then using that as a basis to develop an audit plan, and then following it through by executing it accordingly, and then using all your different auditing techniques and skills, to do an excellent job. And then at the end of the day, putting together a very insightful report that does not just communicate deficiencies and findings, so that you are not like a fault finder, but you also have very robust recommendations, and where possible, you're also able to drill down on certain findings or deficiencies to see if the associated risk has crystallized, to be a trusted advisor, because that is what management and the board of directors, those charged with the responsibility of governance, really want to get from you as an IT auditor. Yeah, I think that gone are the days where you are just a fault finder, and I think any auditor that maintains that kind of disposition would always get friction from management. Yeah. Then we only covered the first aspect that we called user access management, and really just bringing all that together in my mind. It is really all about having a robust understanding and a robust testing strategy for identities, whether it is a user or it is a device, whatever. Today, the world of identities has grown massively. Yeah. Whether it is one that you can tie to a human person, or it is one that you cannot because it's a device or it's generic, etc. From that, you can then visualize that still under user access management, you want to be interested in all the aspects that has to do with authentication. How do these identities gain access to the different technology systems? Whether it is through the conventional, traditional passwords, methods, and the likes, or it is a much more advanced technology of multi-factor authentication, or it is passwordless, Windows Hello. I like that so much. To authorization, which is after you have identified the identity, you've granted access, then what kind of access do they need to have? Which, many of us are familiar with the concept of least privilege, need to have, need to know sort of things, yeah? Such that you are really, as an auditor, interested in whether this access is restricted based on the person's job responsibility, but not just restricted, but also segregated, such that I do not have the kind of rights that enables me to initiate and consummate a certain activity that can easily, very easily lead to fraud, yeah? And then from authorization, you then talk about auditing, yeah? And which is really, really, really around those that have privileged access or administrative users, those that can access servers directly, meaning that they are profiled on the operating system, or they are profiled on the database, so they have direct access to the backend. And all the controls that you then have to think about in terms of monitoring and managing the activities that they carry out, because they have elevated rights, and there are certain things that they can do that a front-end user or a normal business user would not be able to do, that could very easily affect the integrity of data. And you know that once the integrity of data is affected, then that automatically can affect business decisions and the likes, yeah? So we looked at all of that, and I think we did touch change management. Yes, yes, we did. Yeah, and the entire life cycle, from making a request to building the change, to performing the relevant tests, to migrating it to production, and just making sure that the right people are making that migration to production. And I think that there was a particular question that came up around how you can gain comfort over the completeness of program changes or IT changes that you make to systems, whether it is a change to a configuration or a change to a code or a program, as the case may be. Yeah. And in my experience, I have seen that a lot. Yeah. I think that maybe 10% of my entire clients are able to demonstrate visibility of program changes. Yeah. Maybe because you could have a ticketing system, whatever it is, ServiceNow, Remedy, whatever, or maybe you're just using a hard file, right? Excuse me. That in itself does not give you any sort of comfort or assurance that that captures every change, because I mean, you could have an administrator actually make a change without going through all that change management process that you have put in place, whether in Remedy or ServiceNow or the likes. Yeah. So then the question is, how do you gain comfort as an auditor? How do you establish that there is assurance that you have full visibility of program changes, and every the test that you've performed has taken that into consideration? Perhaps that is one, again, like I said, it's something that I have not seen being demonstrated by many of my clients. Maybe a few of them that have very robust and sophisticated systems have been able to do that, right? And maybe a few of them that use the likes of SAP. So in SAP, there is a table called E070 that logs all changes that you transport from test to production. So you can easily gain that kind of comfort, yeah? And then a few other sophisticated clients that have put together a tool such that every change that is made is logged. Yeah. In the absence of all of these, I think that there are other mitigating activities that you can put in place just to give yourself comfort. So for example, maybe those that have administrative rights, you can then maintain some kind of dual purpose password mechanism. You have a part of it, someone else has another part. You cannot make any change until both of us are present. Doesn't mitigate the risk totally, but at least it helps. And makes some other things that you can actually put in place. Yeah. So as an IT auditor, maybe you may want to look at other sources of evidence, maybe like the incidents log. What are the incidents that happened? Which of them could have resulted in a change? And then once you identify it, you then try to trace back in this change log that you have in Remedy or ServiceNow. Was it captured? Yeah, just to get that kind of comfort. Yeah, so that was what we looked at, and today we are going to try and finalize with the remaining domains under IT general controls, which will be covering the computing environment, as well as system development or significant upgrades. Then we would look at auditing application controls. Then we'll look at auditing IT governance structures. And then finally, we'll look at auditing cybersecurity programs. Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to Christine to take us through that very quickly. And along the way, I'm going to chip in and make any contributions as we move along. Thank you very much. Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Peter, for that recap. We'll just launch into the session. As mentioned yesterday, we covered user access management and IT change management. Today, we want to look at computing environment. There are quite a number of aspects that fall under computing environment, things like batch processing, interface processing, identification and resolution of errors. We have backups and recoverability tests, in addition to other data center operations. So the key risks that are presented under business computing include the risk that system failure could cause loss of transaction records, or their inappropriate manual intervention or failure in scheduled job processing. Now, what are the consequences of inadequate backup management and recovery? So I've just given two examples here where in 1996, there was a fire at a bank in Paris where system administrators had to run into the building and actually get backup tapes because they didn't have an offsite place. And so everything was lost. Yeah. Then we have another where a server crashed and 300,000 customers' emails were affected. Imagine you couldn't trace, you probably uploaded a lot of things in your email, or it's just a way of tracking your stuff. So you lost everything there. That is how important the computing environment and management of everything under the computing environment is. So why and how is management of the computing environment important? One, it ensures that IT systems supporting the business are operating reliably and effectively. It ensures that business critical data is stored, it's retained, it's transferred completely within between systems. In cases where there are interfaces between the systems, there is a seamless exchange of data. You don't have some data being lost along the way. So it's a completely different thing when you get it onto the other system. It also enables effective management and monitoring of key IT process controls because of processes such as batch scheduling, backups, third-party management, and problem management. So we're going to look at some aspects of computing environment, after which we will look at the controls that you would expect to see under the domain computing environment, and then wrap up with how would you go about auditing those controls. So let me just rush through this. Batch processing is just basically a process where a number, as you say, a batch, are processed all at the same time. So probably you're processing similar transactions, and at the end of the day, you just click and all of them run at once. And then you have interface processing where there is transfer of data from a source location to a destination location. It could be between different systems. It could be between databases. Then you have real-time processing. So transactions are processed by an application straight away, and there's some sort of user interaction. So an example would be booking an air ticket, because once you book it, they confirm it and update it immediately because they don't want to issue the same ticket twice. So that would be an example of it. So the risks associated with interface stroke batch processes and data recovery, there could be, like I said, inappropriate manual intervention or failures in batch processing. There could be failures, system failures causing loss of transactions or inability to access them. So imagine you're probably on your Finacle system somewhere, you're doing loads and loads of work, and all of a sudden everything just blacks out and you've lost everything. So examples of controls under batch processing would be only approved and tested batches, changes are made to the batch scheduler. Then errors in production processing are identified and resolved. Data is appropriately backed up and recoverable. We'll look at each of these controls as we go on. So the Companies Act under Section 128 requires that the companies maintain statutory records in form of registers, minutes, etc. throughout this life. That is the importance of why, that's the sole reason why, I don't want to say sole because of course there are other important reasons, why batch processing and interface processing and backup of data happens in a business environment. So this here we're just trying to illustrate what actually happens. So you compound jobs, you have maybe job A to job Z, and you transfer them all at the same time. At a particular time, you just click and all of them are transferred. Then you have monitoring of transaction processing. So this is in the day-to-day operations. People probably experience, business users may experience errors or some sort of system failure. That is the risk. So what are the examples under this? You have some data backup and replication happening somewhere. You have some, whatever errors are noted by these business users are resolved in a timely manner, and they're also identified in a timely manner. So another element, in addition to batch processing, interface processing, and backup, would, in the computing environment, would be problem management. Yeah. So how are incidents and problems identified? Is there network performance monitoring? Do you have help desk functions? Can business users reach out at any time that they experience errors so that the effect when left for a long time is not felt? So, like I said, we'll have to look at the controls one by one. I'm going to just go through all the control points, and then later we'll go through a testing process. What do you have to do to ensure that you have covered your risks end to end when you are doing IT auditing? So for the control, data is appropriately backed up and recoverable. Do not forget the recoverable bit, because most most clients I've seen would just backup data, and the last recoverability test they would have done is in the year of our Lord, maybe 2000. So they would rarely consider the recoverability bit, but we're going to cover it here too. So what do you have to consider when you are looking at the control for data backup and recoverability? One, you have to inquire whether, or find out or understand whether third parties are used, for example, cloud service providers. A lot of this is happening these days. You have to understand what type of data files are identified and included in the backup process. What is the frequency of the backup? Is there some sort of management of the changes that are made to backup configuration and schedules, such that people just don't go and change the schedule and then there's a confusion everywhere during the backup process? Do you monitor the backup that you have actually scheduled for successful completion? If there are any errors noted during that backup run, are they resolved? And in such an instant, you have to pay attention that when these errors are actually flagged or they come up, they cannot be overridden. Someone has to take resolution action to resolve those errors, other than just saying ignore. So you have to pay attention to that. Is the backed up data being tested for recoverability? So it's one thing to back up data. It's another thing to confirm that the data that you have actually backed up and stored, maybe somewhere in cloud or so, is usable. It's usable, it's complete, it's accurate for the business users. So most times you'll have to involve the business users when you're doing recoverability tests, because they will tell you, my data is complete, I can see everything, it's like as if I'm working on live. Then other control points you have to consider: is there a process in place to ensure that backup media would be available in the event of an emergency? For example, maybe replication of data to a hot or cold site, ensure that there's some kind of distance between the primary site and the secondary site. If they don't have that real-time replication, do they have maybe other means such as rotation of backup media? Is the data stored on-premise, off-premise, or cloud? Because each of these presents a different risk each time. Have there been establishment of recovery time objectives? Have an RPOs? Is the backup full? Is it partial? Is it incremental? Is it just on a real-time basis that each time you do something, it's already stored? So those are the considerations you have to keep in mind when you are going to confirm that the business actually has established controls around backup and recoverability of their financially significant data, as the case may be. So what would you do to test and attest that these controls are in place and they are working effectively, they're operating effectively? So these control points will help you in the aspect of the design of the control. How good is the control? And then the testing process here you have to do for confirm the operating effectiveness. So one, and obtain an understanding of the process using the control points above. So some of these questions is what you pose to whoever you'll be interviewing. Then once you have understood the process, you have then you obtain maybe a screenshot or view an on-screen backup schedule that will show you what kind of data is backed up, and then the frequency of backup and the type of the backup. So then using that frequency, if for example, we'll say it's on a daily basis. So you know your population, how many days are in a year, if you're auditing the period of it for a year, how many days are in the year, and then based on your population, you can select a sample that represents your population. And remember, we went through sampling yesterday. And then once you picked up your sample, and then for each sample, you have to review evidence of one successful backup. Yeah. So for each of the days, let's say you pick maybe 23rd June, on that day, was backup successful? If it wasn't successful, what are the errors? Were these errors resolved? And then were there reviews that happen, approvals of backup completion by appropriate personnel? You just don't go and pick a gatekeeper and have them approved. So someone who has knowledge of what is going on and who is in a position of authority, preferably. Then there is evidence of recoverability or failover tests performed in the period under review. Like I said, just to confirm that the data that you have backed up, the data that the business is backing up somewhere, can be used, because it's of no use if you back up data and then you load it back and it's a mess. You can't understand anything. You don't even know whether the data is yours or not. So that is the purpose of recoverability tests. So we've covered the control for appropriate data backup and recoverability. We'll just move on to the next, which has to do with errors in production processing are identified and resolved. So during the day-to-day operations, like I said, business users will probably have experience some, it may be just a few errors, may not be that significant. In some instances, it may be a serious issue. Yeah. So do they have problem and issue identification procedures in place? So what control points would you look at for this? One, consider whether the entity has a tool that they use to identify or log errors. So in some cases I see people use service desk tools like Remedy. There's some other tools that clients make use of just to track errors and log them. Then what data fields and system logic is used to alert, log, and process errors. Yeah. So if they use a tool for identification of significant errors, yeah, what is the system logic? Does it pick in accordance to probably the financial transaction to say if it's anything related to revenue, it will flag it there and then. So that is what you also need to understand about the tool that they've put in place. What are the thresholds and severity classifications for processing errors? Yeah. So is it high? Is it low? Do they have that kind of classification in place? Because this would help them in running, in knowing which errors to resolve first and then which ones will come at a later time. What's the frequency of processing those alerts and reviewing errors? Are they reviewed as and when they happen, which is ad hoc? Are they reviewed on a daily basis? Then other control points that you have to consider would be things like, did the system functionality, if they use a tool that is, because I know some people use Excel. Sorry about that. Whether system functionality has operated in an expected manner during the period under review. Are there validation procedures in place to confirm that the errors actually occurred, or it's just someone who doesn't know how to navigate the system? Can the system functionality be overridden? Because if it generates an error and then you also ignore the error, the impacts may be profound. And then what is the appropriateness that is assigned to the person who is performing controls? So what do you have to do to audit these errors? One, again, obtain an understanding what is going on. What do they do? What's the process in place? Then you can obtain a log of errors, confirm the completeness. Remember to confirm the completeness. If a list is being generated in the system, perform control totals. Yeah. So check the number of maybe entries that they've presented you in the generated Excel compared to what the client has in the live system. If there are differences, reject the listing, because it's clearly not a full listing. Then you obtain for your sample. For each sample, you have to review the evidence of resolution in line with agreed procedures and policies. Then is the resolution timely for each of the thresholds that have been identified? What is the appropriateness of corrective action taken? An error can be resolved, but it was just buried somewhere. Yeah. Was the process reviewed by an appropriate personnel? The last we'll have to do under computing environment will have to do with only approved changes are made to the batch scheduler. Earlier on, we understood what batch scheduling is. A lot of jobs being processed or stored at once that would make a batch. So what are the control points? This is related to changes again. What policies do they have in place to test, approve, and review changes before they're made to the system? What's the appropriateness of the approvers of those changes? What's the level of testing involved? What are how do they follow up on the differences that are noted during review? And then what level of restriction is given to the people who make these changes, such that not just anyone can make a change, yeah? So again, did the system functionality operate in an expected manner? How do you validate the accuracy of changes that have been made in the system, such that the change that has been requested is the change that has been implemented in the system? Also confirm again the appropriateness of the persons performing those controls. What do you have to do in this case? The same thing that you did for changes. Obtain a complete list of changes or a log of changes, and then select a suitable sample, and then you have to confirm existence of supporting evidence, for example, signatures, initials on documents, written explanations, check marks, or other indication of follow-up, such as email. Usually clients just present all sorts of evidence to you, and then it's upon you to confirm the appropriateness and sufficiency of that evidence. Yeah. So that is what you have to do. And those are the common controls. Most of the controls that you are probably thinking about under computing environment will fall under these three. And then you can just use the same process to go through what to do, identifying those control points, going through the understanding of the process that is in place, and then moving on to test whether that process is actually being operated as it should. So what are the other points of consideration? You have documented policies in this area. You have roles and responsibilities that have been assigned. You have segregation of duties, very, very, very important. Then you have to also confirm that the level of skill that the people have to perform their duties. And then, because it's very, very high key, it's IT, someone has to know something. And then you also have to confirm that the computing environment has a process in place for identification and resolution of errors, whether during backup, whether during recoverability, whether during everyday processing. Yeah, so that will be it for the computing environment. I just want to move on to the system implementation changes. If you have any questions, please remember to use the chats. We have an expert or panels that will be able to answer whether it's a technical question or whether it's a silly question. As long as it relates to what we are discussing here, they'll be able to answer. So let's go to system implementation. So system implementation is just on another level. It's similar to change management, but on a deeper level. Here, a brand new system is being developed, or if it's not brand new, there's major tweaks, major updates, yeah, being made to the functionality of an existing system, such as major upgrades and such like. So what does the process of system implementation include? You have in the system lifecycle, you have things like initiation, you have construction of the system, you have the testing phase, you have the data conversion from the legacy system to the new system format. Then you have the implementation, you have documentation and training. You have to ensure that these people who are doing who are going to use this new system actually have knowledge of what to do, how to navigate the system. There's adequate segregation of duties during implementation. So we're just going to go through each of these phases so that you get to learn what kind of controls should you expect at each phase of this system implementation. Then later on, we'll go on to the process of identification of control points and how you will test those control points. So like I said, a system change is just on the other arm of system implementation. So the minor updates, fixes, and small enhancements usually fall under change management. If you have major application upgrades and brand new system implementation, in-house developments happening, that will fall under system implementation. Here it's just giving you more details on how system changes relates to system implementation and how are they different. The life cycle, as you can see, the one for system implementation is clearly more detailed. It's clearly deeper than what you have going on under system changes. So why do businesses initiate a system implementation? Yeah, so you go to environments where, and just to mention, when your client or when the business that you're operating has performed a system implementation, you as the IT auditor has to be very, 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 very alert. So why do they do these system implementations? One, to increase efficiencies. Maybe the old version wasn't working as well as the newly introduced version. To improve customer service, if you have customers complaining, improve quality and reliability of management data, standardize business processes. You are probably doing something manually. Now you have a standard process or an automated process in place in the new environment. You have to improve the operation of internal controls to meet legal or regulatory requirements. Like I said, the IFRS, a new IFRS may be generated, yeah, may be communicated, and now you need to include aspects of that accounting policy. So you may need a totally new system if you cannot tweak the old one. And then it also addresses shortcomings of the existing system or the legacy systems, such as reliability and speed. Then you have a total change in business or business processes. Then when you no longer have vendor support for your legacy system. So this is usually why clients or businesses make system developments or new system implementations. So we'll just run through. So under risks that are associated with system implementation, remember again, we do a risk-based audit. One of the key risks is that newly implemented applications inaccurately process data due to coding or configuration issues. There might be errors in migrating data from the legacy system to the new system. And this is where the errors thing is very, very, very common. I've encountered it several times. So what are the examples of controls? Like again, I said, we're going to go through these controls one by one later on. We have new systems or major enhancements have to be adequately tested and authorized before they're implemented. You have the fact that only properly approved new or major enhancements are migrated to production or live. And then you have the fact that data is properly migrated or converted. When we say properly, it has aspects of completeness and accuracy. Now, some of the major support or developments can be in-house or they can be external suppliers. We know some of these external suppliers, SAP that Peter's talked about, IBM, Oracle, Siemens, there's so much. So you have usually clients will establish roles and responsibilities during that cycle of implementing, because they will just give it a certain name, project something, and then they'll start the process, give roles so that people know what to do in the entire project life cycle. Yeah, so you have the user community who is going to use it, the business owner, probably the initiator of that change. You have the system or business analyst. Then you have the application developer, the person who actually sit down and program this new code. You have the production or control librarian, just to ensure that everything is moving as per the schedule, as per the expectations. You have the project manager and development managers that will just oversee the entire operation of the project or the system implementation. Moving on to system lifecycle, we'll just categorize it into 6 phases. And like I said, under each of these phases, we'll be identifying controls that you have to look out for when your client or your business has implemented a new system. 1, project initiation stage. You have the analysis and design stage. Later on, once you've analyzed, designed, you move on to construction, you move on to testing and quality analysis. You have now data conversion from the legacy system format to the new system format. Then you have the actual implementation, or what people usually say, go live. So what are the risks that are associated with system implementations? Like I said, there are usually errors at the point of go live, leading to loss of processing functionality. You are probably able to do like 6 things in this former system. Now you can only do 2. Data converted into the new system is inaccurate or incomplete. I already mentioned this. There are gaps in control processes, and that will result into ongoing errors. So under the entire life cycle of the system implementations, you have to look out for, under each of these phases, look out for segregation of duties being maintained, the 4I principle. You look out for things like project management, because usually they'll implement external controls that you'll use to fill your comfort bucket and feel a bit of assurance, yeah, over your new reporting system or whatever system that they have implemented. So under the project initiation stage, just that the project is refined, it's prioritized and approved, what kind of controls would you expect under project initiation stage? So you have things like identification of all relevant stakeholders and approval from initiation. The project that is being, the system that is being developed and implemented has to be approved by the highest level. Review board minutes if you have to, yeah? Maybe management minutes, ongoing reports. So you have to look out for that. And the analysis and design stage, you just have identification of business user requirements or technical specifications, what you would need in the new system. Examples of controls would be review and approval of the design by key stakeholders, the stakeholders that you've identified in phase 1, yeah? So this would be business owners, because they are going to be the ones using the system. You have the IT department, the risk department, the IA department, very, you probably also fall under this IA, the internal audit department, if you're an IT internal auditor. So you have the testing and QA stage, where developers build a new system, then they test it. There are loads and loads of testing types that go on. There's unit system integration. We went through this yesterday under the change management stage. And then examples of controls you would expect is that whatever test scripts have been developed have been reviewed by appropriate personnel. The test results have been reviewed and approved. Close to testing phases, because there can be a lot of changes that happen after you've tested, yeah? Then someone goes and tweaks something. So approval should happen at the point where you're almost going to migrate to the, almost going to go live. Then you have monitoring and investigation and resolution of defects. What defects have you noted under the testing stage? How are they monitored? How are they investigated? How are they resolved? To ensure that those risks don't crystallize at the point where you're now saying you're going live. And then you have the data conversion stage, where you say you convert the data from the legacy system or the old system into the new system. What kind of controls would you expect to see under this? There is a formal kind of mapping from the old data to the new data. Then you have things like record counts being performed. If the previous data had 2 million entries, the new system should have 2 million entries. We have the implementation stage, which is now the go live decision, or where you now implement the system. So for this stage, ensure that the backout procedures, if you initiate the go live and things are not panning out as as you thought. There have to be procedures where you go back to the original stage and you don't corrupt yourself or corrupt your IT environment or your system. And then examples that you'd expect to see, there's final approval for go live by the steering committee or key stakeholders. There's assessment of project against go live criteria, approval, go live remediation plan. Okay, so these are the 4 major controls that all those control points you've seen, you classify them under 4 major ones. One is that new system enhancements are adequately tested and approved before being migrated into production. Yes. So what kind of things would you have to look at here? One, the policies and procedures that the client has in place or the business has in place to ensure that only tested changes, and then it gives only tested changes are migrated or are implemented, and then it gives guidance as to what roles should be there, what committees should be formed, what controls should be in place before the actual development and throughout the life cycle of the development of a system. You have things like existence of testing, appropriateness of test approvers, how the appropriate level of testing is determined. Is there segregated environment? We talked about this yesterday. The environment for development of that code of that system has to be different from the environment which tests the system, and then the go live or the production environment. Completely segregated. Again, we ring the segregation of duties. Yeah, someone can do something end to end. Yeah, because one, malice. Someone can do something that's completely inappropriate. Two, it could just be duty errors, or they've not seen something. That's why reviews happen. So there has to be a level of segregation of duties. Yeah. Then under data is properly migrated and converted. What do you do? Understand how the conversion was made by the client. Maybe there is a mapping structure in place that you have to ask for. How completeness of data is validated. Follow up on differences noted during the migration. Yeah, and then evidence of approval, you have to obtain this. Then also note the approvers down there. Are they appropriate? Are they as the policy states them to be? If it's to be at the board level, you just don't have the CFO approving it. Yeah, so you have to look out for that aspect. Then we also said earlier on that there's a risk that errors might occur during this implementation or go live process or at any stage in the life cycle. So you have a control. You have to expect to see a control, like problems during program development or system implementation are monitored and resolved. Yeah. So understand how problems are identified as you as the IT auditor. Identify or confirm that there are pre and post implementation tracking in place that has been established by the maybe the project management committee or the business, where the approvals made for the resolutions taken, and the evidence of periodic review of these problems and resolutions. And then I also wanted to mention root cause analysis, because it's important that those problems, all those errors, do not reoccur. Yeah. So these are the things that you have to look at when you're looking at the error management or problem management environment during system implementation. Now we move on to training. After you have approved the system, after you've migrated the data accurately and completely, after all problems have been resolved, your system is now in place. Yeah. So now the system is not going to use itself. There are business users that are going to be in place to actually perform their day-to-day operations. You want to have assurance that these business users will know what to do. Yeah. So you have to perform training. Now you as the auditor has to take procedures in place to confirm that, establish procedures to confirm that the training program was developed for the end users, that training program was approved. Yeah. Then confirm the appropriateness of curriculum and course materials. So you probably have to know how the new system is different from the old system. So you know aspects to pick out. Yeah. If there is now a new model for let's say do authentication, yeah, then you have to they have to have that aspect of how do users log in, how do they use this new function, and then also you have to confirm that the date of the training is close enough to the system go live date, because people can learn something, I mean, we're only human, and they forget it, yeah. Then there are all kinds of calls to the IT service desk people, we cannot do this, I can't access that, I can't do that. So you just want to ensure that the training is close enough to the system go live date. Then you have to also confirm that the client or the business has maintained evidence to demonstrate that which the user that have attended the training. So there could be a sheet where the signature of different users, or if you have an online meeting like this, maybe there is a log of the participants that have attended. And then there is also evidence of sign off on that course material. And then you have to, in some instances, you have to go up and above just which participants attended the training, because someone can just attend the training and sleep the entire time, they don't know what they did. So there has to be some kind of maybe a testing that was performed, or to test the knowledge that has been relayed to these new users or to these people being trained. I think that is it for system implementation. Majorly, you'll see that the controls that rotate around here have already been covered in the other domains. Here, you just have to go a little bit deeper. So that's why I have summarized them like this. Like again, like I said, if you have any questions, please reach out to our panelists via the chats, and they will be able to take on any questions that you have. Now, would like to do a brief case study just to confirm that we know, I mean, to confirm the level of knowledge we have gained here. So it's just going to be very, very brief. And we're going to use polls. I had earlier that the polls were not working. Hopefully, the gods have smiled upon us and now they're working. So we have our bank Y XYZ. Probably you work as an IT internal auditor, or you are an external IT auditor for bank bank XYZ. So the problem that we have in our hands is that bank XYZ have used a core banking system called CBS. Yeah, I mean a core banking system CBS that is called Uber only for 4 years. Yeah, and are already in discussion with a vendor to implement FlexCube as a replacement. So they had Uber, now they want to implement FlexCube. In the last 4 years, Bank XYZ have struggled with over-reliance on Uber, on the Uber vendor for basic maintenance support. The Uber CBS have also lacked many basic functionalities to support end-to-end workflows, which have little or no manual intervention. Yeah, so it's not performing automated processes properly. Even worse, the Uber core banking system integration bus is limited in supporting integration with other third parties, and the current quality of data is appalling. Yeah, so you load something, it takes forever, and you can't really get that element of efficiency. So based on the bank's current target operating model, management intends to rapidly establish relationships with fintechs to drive customer experience through emerging digital technology and service offerings, and also improve productivity and efficiency through end-to-end automated workflows, and increase effective decision-making through business intelligence and data analytics. Yeah, so they're looking to improve their quality of data for data analytics and business intelligence. So since the issues of the bank, the bank has faced with the CBS in the last 4 years are not able to support the target operating model designed to drive the bank's strategic objectives, the board of directors have now approved the sourcing and procurement of a replacement, which we say as FlexCube. So you have recently joined the bank as an IT auditor. And management is keen to get it right this time with your invaluable support. So you learned system implementation, you know the control points, you know what you have to do, you know the system life cycle, you know the possible controls that are implemented at a system life cycle. Now they are relying on you, on your knowledge to have a better system environment. So if we can just load first poll question. Then if you're on.
Yes, thank you, Christine. And I can see that the poll questions have been launched. This is one case study that I tried to put together this morning from the several experience I've had, both as a member of the project management team and also as an auditor. Yeah. So what you can see is the kind of scenarios that I see play out quite often, and it will be quite interesting to just get your views on how I mean, what you think. I don't know how much experience you've got, but I mean, these are just polls and we're just really rating to see and get a sense from you. Yeah. So based on the issue described and your experience, what factor could have represented a major reason why the bank is in this situation? Yeah. So please select. I don't think that it is the desire of any organization to use a system for just 4 years. And that can easily happen simply because the entire project management or change management or the assurance framework to support that implementation just went wrong. Okay. Do we have results?
Maybe 30 more seconds.
Okay. Yes. All right. So please select those. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just really to get a sense from you what you think based on the story that we have described in here. Okay, so I see 52% management did not match the functionalities of UBA with its strategy. Okay. And then 36% of you say that the project team poorly defined the critical success criteria and the indicators for measurement. Yeah, I guess. I mean, again, like I said, no right or wrong answer in here. It's really just trying to bog on your thought process. But all four could have easily, very easily been the reason. You can imagine all the issues they have talked about, and you would wonder how they were able to scale through the different stages that Christine has talked about. Yeah. So it may not have even just been about the functionalities. I mean, it could be several other things, but I think that this is a fair response and it shows that you are following. Can we launch the second? Okay, so you've been given a chance to present an assurance plan for the new implementation to the board of directors. What would be your most critical message to highlight? Obviously, you're going to have a lot to say, but we've just put in some options in here. And I just want to get a sense of the message that you will consider most critical, that you will be hammering on just to drive it home to the board. Yeah, let me get a sense of what you think. Okay, again, no right or wrong answers. just do a quick reflection on the options and just slam in there what you will be emphasizing as you go for that all-important board meeting. I can see Sharon is asking to know the answer to the first question. Like I mentioned, no right or wrong answer, but all four that you saw in the first question can easily be the reason why the project or the implementation of UBA was a mess. Okay, here we see almost evenly distributed. So 37% of you think that you would emphasize the role the board should play for a successful implementation. Quite interesting. 29% of you think that you would emphasize on the reasons why the previous implementation failed. 24% of you think you would emphasize on the adoption of a combined assurance framework, and then 10% what success should look like. Interesting. I really wonder what you think the role of the board should be for the successful implementation of FlexCube. And I mean, if you did emphasize it so much, I don't know to what extent it's going to contribute to the success of the implementation of the new system. But again, no right or wrong answers. Bernard, I don't know what you think about this one. I'm just a bit not so aligned with it.
I'd go with the role of the board and perhaps the combined assurance framework. But in essence, all these factors are important and they must be put out there so that we maintain a big picture view of the issue at hand. That is what governance is about, the big picture.
Okay, good. Thanks, Bernard. Yeah, no right or wrong answer, but everything in here is equally important. Okay, let's launch the third, if I think it's the third. Okay, so you have performed a quick review on the vendor, and the CBS and the project team have nominated to management. Yes, the CBS that the project team have nominated to management, and you have noted a few matters of concern. Which would you consider to pose a higher risk, or maybe the highest risk? Because everything again that I have listed in here equally contributes to the reasons why projects fail. But out of everything listed in here, which one would you be most concerned about? Yeah, because remember, in our case study, they have opted to use FlexCube. They've approved it, and they're going to go with that particular vendor. Yeah, but you now that has just come into the firm, you've done your quick assessment, and you are seeing that the required customization is 40% of the total required functionality. And I really hope that you can imagine what that means. Yeah. Vendor is domiciled in another continent and struggles with communicating in English. Okay. The vendor's proposed terms require an incremental fee for every new change outside the approved BRD. BRD is the business requirement document. Okay. That document will have all the functionalities that you want to have in the to-be system. And then the project team received and considered only 2 proposals from vendors, from which they selected the vendor that is going to deploy FlexCube. I just wonder what you think is the most critical. Okay, so let's wait a few more seconds and get the answers. Okay, again, no right or wrong answer, everything in there. In my own personal experience, like I mentioned, both as a member of the project team and as an auditor, these are elements that I have seen very regularly. Okay, required customization is 40% of the total required functionalities. I hope you did not select that because I sort of added some voice on that. Yeah, that's 50%. 22% of you think that it would be an issue if the vendor is in another continent and struggles with communicating in English. I have a couple of clients wanted to do a system implementation. Vendor is based in India. They plan to go live in March. Now they cannot go live until December, simply because of what was happening in India, coronavirus and the likes. Yeah, so I mean, those are practical real life scenarios that I see on a daily basis as an auditor. Okay, I hope that is the last. I think that is the last. Christine, right? Is there a fourth?
I think that's the last.
Okay, great. So Christine, over to you. That encapsulates what needs to be covered for IT general controls. Sincerely speaking, there is just so much more that could have been reviewed in this session. I mean, if it was a real sort of, full-fledged kind of training that takes days and weeks.
Peter, we have one last one. Sorry, there's one last one.
Okay, sorry, please deploy. All right, 6 months later, the project team completed the third data migration dry run with significant variances noted between source and target. Management needs to go live and request your advice. What is the most critical procedure that would inform your view? Okay, I think this should be fairly straightforward. And perhaps here there might be a right answer, or I don't know. Let me see what you think. Yeah. So normally in a system implementation, by the time you've gotten to the point where you want to perform mock tests, dry runs, especially at the point of data migration, I mean, in my experience, I've seen maximum of 3, because by the time they've done the first and the second, they've been able to identify the issues and they're able to resolve it and get to a point where what is residual or what is remaining it's within the bank's or the organization's risk appetite, yeah, and perhaps falls within the threshold of their critical success factor, for which, I mean, once the output is out, in my experience, I've never seen where it is completely clean. Then the steering committee or whoever is saddled with the responsibility of providing an approval, maybe even the board, we'll look at the issues, compare it with their critical success factor, and give clearance on the basis that once they go live, they can resolve the issues on an ongoing basis. Yeah. But in this case, they performed the third, and they're still seeing significant variances. So that's why they brought you into the picture as the IT auditor. I wonder what you will do first. Okay. Few more seconds and let's see the output. Okay, let's see. All right, so I see that some of us are torn between holding a meeting with the vendor to understand the root cause for the variances noted, while others are going to go back to basis and review the data migration strategy to identify gaps in the approach being followed. No right or wrong answer. I think that, well, you may just have to do a mix of some of these things, yeah, depending on the actual circumstances. But, well, good, you've participated, and I hope that you found the case study interesting. Thank you. Christine, over to you. I can see that we again behind time, so all right.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay. So now we go into the aspect of auditing application controls. So as most of you would have it, or know it as input and output controls, or they have different names. Some people know it as IT dependencies. So We'll cover quite a bit under the session. We'll have a definition for application controls. How do we classify application controls? What's the standard thought process for testing application controls? Then we have a session conclusion. I really want to run through this really, really quick. Again, please reach out to our panelists in case you have answers, questions, because we are already against time. So application controls are automated controls that relate to the processing of transactions within a business process. Yeah. So most times application controls would have to be embedded or designed at the stage of system implementation or system build, which we just went through. So they're typically preventive in nature, and they're embedded within the application, or they could be configured. Yeah. So we have 5 classes of application controls. I'm just going to run through this really quick. We have automated calculations, you have automated controls, restricted access, and segregation of duties. You have system reports or key reports. You have interfaces between systems. So most times application controls will fall under these 5 categories, and keep it in mind, because you can easily, once you know how to audit or test automated controls, there is no automated computation that is performed by the system that will come to you and you will not know what to do. Yeah. So let's go through automated calculations first. The examples of automated calculations that include automated interest computation by the system. You have weighted average cost computation for those who work in the manufacturing industries. You have system accurately revalues the entity's books in foreign currency using the prevailing exchange rate, maybe at the end of the day, and then recognizes a gain or loss. Then you have system accurately performing mathematical calculations on payroll. For the Ugandans, we know pay and NSSF components. Yeah. So most times those things are run automatically by the system. So when you are so I'm just going to run through what you need to do to test application controls. Consider aspects of the control. Who performs the control? What exactly do they do when these automated calculations are being run? What criteria do they use? When does the system execute that control? Yeah. And then where exactly is the control located? And why is this control being done? What's the objective of having this control, and how is the control being executed? Yeah. So I'll give you an instance of how to audit an automated calculation. The first thing is for you to obtain the system logic. Yeah. What exactly does the system do? Yeah. What are the what do they call it? What are the components of that computation result? So if you have something like interest income from loans and advances, yeah, so you probably have to of course obtain your sample, but if you're doing such a test, you have to rely on some sort of benchmark, and usually they'll give you maybe a trial balance from the business, or at the end of the year you're now performing your audit, you have a trial balance from the finance department, and then you have key system-driven balances. So what you have to do is identify key system-driven balances, and then once you identify that, you have things like interest income, interest expense, you have other sorts of revenue like fees and commission, then you pick samples from those. Yeah, you sample. So doing application controls, we believe in a test of 1. You can test more, but we perform procedures to first of all confirm that the configuration works. Yeah. So how is the system configured to perform this interest income computation? Once you have obtained understanding of this, then you go ahead and test in regard to that configuration. So once you picked your sample, you identify things like the rates that the system uses, what maybe it uses the balance at the end of the day, maybe it uses the number of days in the year. So once you've understood the conditions under which the system computes that that automated calculation, you from your end will now use those same conditions for the samples you picked. Yeah, use the same rate for that loan, use the same daily basis, which is probably you can use 365 days usually for local currency, or it can be 360 days for foreign currency. Then you also, and you pick the prevailing balance at the end of the day, and then you try and compute. Then you perform comparisons between what you have manually computed versus what the system has done. Yeah. Then, so before you pick your samples, again, ensure that your population is complete. So for loans and advances, you will probably have to get that listing and tie it back to the trial balance. Yeah. So if the balance, if your listing is showing you 3 million, tie it back to the trial balance. What does the trial balance say? So once you have that comfort, you've gained some sort of comfort that your list is complete, then you can go ahead and pick your samples and just go through what I've mentioned for automated calculations. So automated controls are kind of similar to automated calculations, though in this there is no sort of calculation. The system just performs the control end to end. There are things like system is configured to edge and classify loans accurately. So most of these examples will be for the banking sector. And then also for the manufacturing sector, there is system accurately applies the most recent rate in the price list when invoices are raised. You have things like approval limits have been defined in the system. You have other things like system enforced segregation of duties. Again, apply the who, what, when, where, why, how the control operates. Once you have that understanding, then you can go ahead and test. The first thing, again, is to pick your sample. You can perform a test of one, because we believe that once the system has been configured correctly and you have some semblance of comfort over how the IT general controls operate, you can now rely on the system and say, you know, since they have they review the activities of privileged users, leavers are terminated on a timely basis, only people who need to have access to the system actually have access to the system. You've established that. Now you can just pick a sample one and you expect that the system does the same for all the other samples, yeah, based on that fact. So what you'll do here is select your samples once again, then you confirm the system, how is the system, for example, configured to edge and classify loans, yeah? So you probably have an on-screen view if the client allows you, or, yes, Peter?
Oh, no. I mean, I'm just mindful of time, right? So I think that we can just move on this, yeah?
Okay. Okay. So what you have to do here is just pick your samples, confirm the system configuration, and go ahead and test that that configuration actually works. I've already gone through that. For system restricted access and segregation, we use the same thought process like I described. Then you have system reports. There are things like the trial balance that I've just mentioned, accounts receivable edging report. You have inventory valuation reports. So how do you perform the tests for that? Reports can either be customized or standard, or there can be queries. So identify the basis of assurance that is required from the report here. What does the report require you? What does the report generate? What kind of data does the report have? So you can now confirm instances of the report that has been generated and provided to you to what the system actually has. Yeah. So you can perform comparisons between what you have and what the system has, and maybe perform some confirmatory test inspections for specific fields and tie it back to the system. Then you have interface controls. This is usually through happens when data is being transferred from one system to another. You just want to confirm that data is accurately and completely being transferred. Yeah. So that you can perform your test using edit checks, build, and then you can also do completeness and accuracy tests. So probably you generate data from one system, a full listing, confirm completeness again, back to the live system, generate the data that has now been migrated into this other system, perform comparisons. You can use Excel if your data can fit on an Excel, or automated tools like SCL. You just perform comparisons, totals, you check for specific fields to ensure that whatever you have on one system was accurately and completely migrated into the new, into the other system. So this is usually for banks, it's between the core banking system and the financial reporting system. So we've quickly run through that. I'm afraid we'll not have time for an icebreaker.
No, why shouldn't we have an icebreaker? Come on, use that as an opportunity to take some water. And I guess while you do that and we prepare for the icebreaker, right? Maybe just to bring it all together, yeah? And I reckon that we have a mix of attendees for this training. Some are from the industry and are IT auditors within the industry, while some others are consultant or external auditors, yeah? If you are in the industry, I bet that there is very little that you probably do in relation to application controls, because the idea is this, and you would have noticed that most of the application controls in there should actually have been gotten right at the point of deploying the system. Yeah. So for example, an automated calculation or control is one that should have been gotten right at the point of the testing, the system testing, the integration testing, the UAT, all of that. All of that should have been gotten right at that point in time. Yeah. And I think that once that is gotten right, then for you as an internal auditor in the industry, you're more or less going to be interested in just confirming that the IT general controls are effective. Because the only reason why those automated or application controls or configurations would then change or be impacted is where, for example, someone has abused their privilege rights and has probably run a program, and as a result, the system then begins to malfunction. Yeah. But if you are an external auditor and you're not in the industry, you're a professional, you're a consultant in the professional service line, I guess that's what we have talked about might be of interest to you, especially if you are probably carrying out a comprehensive ICT audit, or you are supporting the auditors that perform an audit of the financial statement. Yeah. And again, all of that really essentially sits below an effective IT general controls environment. Yeah. Icebreaker, some of you would rather be in an elevator with Barack Obama. Excellent. I don't know why, but let's launch the next because of time. Okay. What is your preferred working style? Working from home or from the office, indifferent? Let us know from wherever you are. Okay. And while we wait for that, I see Ahmed raised the question, very important. If the configuration is hard-coded, then how are you going to perform your tests? Yeah. So there are two ways. You are either, I mean, if you do have access to the code or configuration and you do have the expertise or skills to interpret that configuration, then that is what you will be reviewing. Yeah. But I think that is really rare. I've not seen so many instances where an auditor gets to review the code, the configuration, the program and the likes, especially where you are dealing with a system that has been developed or deployed by a third party. Yeah. Now, in events that that is not possible, it was not in-house developed, etc., and nobody has access to the code, or you don't have the competency, then you can build, you can build your own sort of program using data to try and reperform what the hard code program does, and then you compare your own results with with what the program has done. For example, Christine talked about, say, in a banking environment where the system is supposed to do a daily computation of the interest income and then pass it to a certain accruals account. I don't think you're going to have access to the code of FlexCube or Finaco or T24 or banks or profits, as the case may be. So you're probably going to get data, prepare a program that would do an analysis based on several parameters, rebuild maybe for a sample or more, and rebuild the interest income balance and then compare with what the hard code had done. Yeah. Yes. Are we done with icebreakers? Yes. Preferred working style, 43% would rather work from the office. 39 work from home. Okay, interesting. Do we have a last one? All right, if you could learn one new skill relevant to IT auditing, which would it be? Data analysis and visualization, programming for automated continuous auditing, project management skills, forensics. Let's know what you think. Okay, Rebecca is asking to know how you can perform excellent IT audits remotely. Well, I think I can count the number of times I have had to go to the office since last year, March, and I have done so many audits of the major companies in Uganda, end to end, remotely. So it's possible. Okay, I don't know how to explain that, but it's possible. Okay, so a good percentage would rather want to have data analysis and visualization skills. Interesting. 20%, 27% forensics. Okay, 20% programming of automated continuous auditing. Okay, interesting. I mean, I find the top two quite interesting for me. I mean, in the first 2-3 years in my profession, I had to do those quite a bit, and I found it extremely interesting. Yeah. I think for all others that have raised the question, the panelists will answer. Because of time, I need to hand over now to Christine to take us through auditing IT governance structures. Okay, Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Peter, for that icebreaker. Let's just get into our next session, which has to do with auditing IT governance structures. And hopefully we can also go through it efficiently and effectively because of the time. Let's see. Okay, so what we'll cover under this: how is IT important to the business? What are the objectives of IT within an organization? What are the relevant governance standards that apply to IT and IT structures? We'll look at how the organization structures and the IT organogram fits together. We'll also look at other considerations that you should pay attention to when you're auditing the area of IT governance. Yeah. So the effective use of IT is critical to the success of enterprise strategy for obvious reasons. The use of IT has the potential to be the major driver of economic wealth in the 21st century. In some industries, it is a necessary competitive resource to differentiate and provide competitive advantage, while in many others, it determines survival, not just prosperity. So that is very, very true. It rings true because for some entities that are very sophisticated, you find that the IT department is actually a profit center, a revenue center, and it's not a cost center. What are the objectives of using IT within an organization? Could include business requirements that drive the IT goals. The IT goals also drive investment in IT resources, and IT resources require processes to operate. So there is that cycle, as you can see. Okay, so let's move on to the key governance aspects. We have the fact that effective IT governance contributes to control efficiency, it controls to effectiveness, it allows organizations' investment in IT to realize both financial and non-financial benefits because of the efficiency, that effectiveness that IT presents. Yeah, there should be some sort of governance and some sort of alignment to the overall business objective. So the primary outcomes of an effective governance, if you have an effective governance over IT in place, what could it produce for you? You have the fact that IT strategies align with organizational objectives, risks are timely identified and managed appropriately. You have IT investments are optimized to deliver value. You're just not throwing money in the bush. You can see something coming out of the investment. You have IT performance is defined, it's measured, and it's reported using meaningful metrics. And then you have IT resources are managed effectively. So note that sometimes when you go and audit a business and you find that they either have no controls whatsoever, or they have poor control, the controls are there, they're very, very poor, they're poorly designed, they're not operating, it's because of the tone at the top. It's because there is ineffective IT governance. Yeah. So that's usually the sole reason why things are not working according to plan. So we have the aspect of an organizational governance and how the IT governance relates with it. So note that IT governance is a sub-discipline of the organizational governance, and it consists of leadership, organizational structures, policies to ensure that the enterprise's IT supports organization strategies and objectives, as we've already mentioned. Yeah, IT should only seek to drive achievement of the organization's objectives. So you have the organization as a whole, the organogram, you have your different business units, then you have IT that feeds into the entire structure. So if a business has implemented a governance framework in place, we'll see some of its frameworks that can be adopted. There should be 5 key areas that should be tackled. So if you're auditing IT governance, look out for these areas. One is strategical alignment. So the IT governance framework should provide strategic direction of IT and then alignment of IT and business with respect to services, projects, linkage between business objectives and initiatives. Then you have the aspect of risk management where IT governance should determine the processes that are in place to ensure that the risks have been adequately addressed, and risk assessments include the aspects of IT investment. Yeah. Then you have value delivery. The IT governance framework should ensure that the IT and the business create a partnership designed to drive maximum business value from IT. It's just that the IT is not doing something completely different from what the business requires it to do. We have the performance measurement, where the framework provides mechanisms to verify strategic compliance, and then IT performance and contribution to the success of business as a whole. Then you have resource management. The framework that the business adopts should seek to provide high-level direction for sourcing and use of IT resources, to oversee the aggregate funding of IT at an enterprise level, and ensure that there is adequate IT capability and infrastructure to support the business. Okay, so let's move to the model for the 3 lines of defense. You have the first line of defense being the operations, which usually includes IT management. You have the second level of defense that includes compliance and risk. Then you have the third level of defense, which includes internal audit. Yeah. So most times you as an IT auditor who is working within the industry will fall under the internal audit. So what does the first line of defense seek to do? Implementation and management of the business processes. And then the compliance and risk seeks to monitor the enterprise-wide risks and to ensure that the controls that have been placed actually are in line with these risks. Then the internal audit department or line of defense provides independent assurance that risk management and controls are operating effectively. Okay, so we have the IT governance standards. We have COBIT and we have ITIL. So just run through this. They have websites you can always go and read about these things. So you have the 2007 COBIT 4.1 that provides good practices across domains, process framework, and presents activities in manageable and logical structure. Yeah, it's strongly focused on control and less on execution. You have COBIT 5, which we covered yesterday, seeks to create optimal value for IT by maintaining a balance between realizing benefits and optimizing the risk level, so that you just don't dive into a project head first without assessing the risk and the resources that you require. So they have some limitations because it's just used as a reference and a set of best practice and not an off-shelf cure. Yeah. Then, so it depends on how the business actually implements these standards or adopts certain frameworks. Now the ITIL, while the COBIT standard defines what should be done, ITIL provides best practice guidance on how IT processes can be designed. Yeah, it's the most widely accepted approach to IT service management. It emphasizes a number of key points such as business and IT integration to seek that they mesh and there's a smooth operation between the two aspects. It is IT as a service business. So IT, the clients of the IT, actually the overall business, they should seek to serve the business. And then there's a formal performance measurement programs such as benchmarking and so on. So who should be in charge of IT and overseeing the structures that are in place to IT? As most of you may know, it should be the board of directors, depending on the assumed importance of the IT, because in some aspects, the importance of IT is so key that it's valued. These direct reporting lines to the board of directors for places such as banks. So depending on the assumed importance of IT, there might be an IT director on the board, like I said, and they may report into one of the board. So you have things like IT strategy committees and steering committees that might be in place to oversee the activities of the IT to see that they're established and they're implemented according to the policies in place. So we have developed some of the considerations that you would put in place when auditing IT governance structures as an IT auditor. A lot more guidance is offered by the Institute of Internal Auditors, which we'll just breeze through. But these points here are developed on COSO 17 principles. You can just quickly Google COSO 17 principles. We've just classified them in terms of control environment. So the IT governance control environment, you ask questions during your audit, like how is IT strategy aligned with business? Yeah, things like who approves the IT expenditure, who approves the IT budget. Then you have to understand the IT organization structures, including roles and responsibilities. How important is IT to the overall business? What is the level? What are the reporting levels that are in place? Is there compliance function? How does this compliance function interact with IT? Is there an IT training plan in place? What is the competence of the entire IT department? Because you're basically banking on these people to support your operations and to hope that you operate seamlessly and you have as minimal issues with your IT environment as possible. So there has to be accountability. And then roles and responsibilities have to be clearly communicated, because it's one thing to define the role and then someone doesn't know that they're supposed to do certain things. We have risk assessment. I've just given you items that you could look at, you could request for to confirm some of these things, including the IT strategy document, the business strategy. So you see whether there is some connection between these two, their organograms or what you know as organization structures. You have IT training plan, and then maybe you have correspondence between the compliance functions and so on. So under risk assessment area, you have questions like, how are the IA audit plans developed? do they include both the business and the technology audit aspects? How are IT risk assessments conducted? If they perform an enterprise-wide risk assessment, is IT included as part of that risk assessment? And how are significant changes identified and analyzed in the IT environment? Is fraud risk considered part of the internal audit risk analysis? So the things that you have to look at, such as the risk register, risk reports, internal audit plan, to see whether IT is part of it, internal audit reports to maybe communicate the key issues that they're seeing or the gaps that are seen in the IT environment. So you have things like for the area of control activities, your point of focus would be asking questions like, have effective controls been designed and implemented? Have policies and procedures in line with the output of the IT risk assessments been defined? Have they been approved? Because it's one thing to do with policy, but if you don't seek approval from an appropriate level, then there is no mandate to implement that policy. And then you have information and communication, which basically just seeks to understand how does the business communicate internally, how communications meant to external stakeholders. So your questions as an IT auditor would be, how does IT management establish roles and responsibilities, set policies, monitor, evaluate, and reinforce effective controls? Do they have a tracking system in place for issues? And are those issues timely resolved? Do they perform root cause analysis for incidents to ensure that those incidents do not recur? How are issues communicated externally? Is there a process in place? Do they have to contact a certain designated person who is like the media person or something? Then we have the monitoring aspect. That here you have to understand how the internal audit department conducts IT controls testing, the tracks of these issues, and see whether recommendations have been implemented in suggested time intervals. So for this, you probably have to look at internal audit reports. You have to look at maybe correspondences between the business and the internal audit department. As much as possible, the internal audit department should be independent, yeah, because you are the third line of defense. You're supposed to provide some sort of assurance. So this questionnaire has been developed by the Institute of Internal Auditors, and it has been, it's organized into 4 areas. You have organization and governance structures, and I'm wondering whether we'll just not share these slides with you so that you can go through this, because the questions are pretty much straightforward. And so when you audit, when you're performing your IT governance audits, there are these aspects that you have to put in place, yeah? So if you follow this, you should be able to address your risk around the area of IT governance being established, over IT processes and procedures. So you have the questionnaires for organization and governance structures, you have executive leadership and support, you have strategic operational planning, and you have service delivery measurement. Maybe Peter can add on to that before I proceed.
Oh yes, I think that the questionnaire is pretty straightforward, and since we are going to share the presentation slide, the participants can go through it in detail, and I hope that finally answers many of your questions on whether or not you're going to get the content, yeah? But perhaps just to bring it all together as Christine prepares to take on the final section on the aspect of IT governance. For me, I mean, I know that she's talked about some aspects that again requires that balance in terms of what kind of IT auditor you are, whether you are in the industry or you are an external IT auditor, yeah, because I think the considerations will slightly change, yeah, for someone who is in the industry from someone who is external, yeah. But in general, at least from my own experience, this is not an area that is audited quite often. I mean, if you look at most internal audit plans, you would not see elements so much of IT governance. Perhaps the area that is being introduced quite more often is under governance, is data governance. But perhaps that is only for organizations that have begun to see data as an asset, yeah, and want to make the most of the data they have to create excellent customer experience. They're able to use their insights of customer preference to, to drive an advantage in the market, yeah. But generally, every other aspect under IT governance is one that is looked at seldomly. I mean, because once you get your IT strategy right for the next 5 years, then perhaps you may just want to monitor it once in a while just to make sure that you are aligned. One of the things that you would want an IT auditor to keep an eye on is what you call value for money, yeah, throughout the life cycle. Once you've understood or established the IT strategy, you are clear on your risk associated with preventing you from achieving that strategy. You've put together the organization has put together all the policies to mitigate those risks, and then management has a sophisticated method of monitoring performance against strategy, and there are clear KPIs, metrics, all of those things in place. And operations, IT continues to support the business in line with those KPIs, and where even applicable, IT has become a profit center, not just a cost center. I haven't seen that a lot here in Uganda, but in Nigeria, where I worked for many years, especially for the banks, the telcos, IT is a profit center. They make their own money by developing products, developing different kinds of services, and they are making money. They are sharing bonus. Yeah, hallelujah. So with all of that in mind, as an auditor, you want to be very, very keen on value for money. Is our IT investments in the direction that is giving the overall business the kind of value that it deserves or that it requires based on the strategic objectives, yeah? But every other element, I think that you probably look at it once in maybe 2 years, 3 years, and once you get it right, you're done, you move on. And any requirement for you to look at it again is probably going to be influenced by the changing environment. For example, you had policies, IT policies that had nothing to do with remote working, and then suddenly we're all working from home. So as an IT auditor, you want to be sure that there is a remote working policy, and it is robust. It covers everything that the organization should be considering. Or maybe suddenly you want your staff to begin to use their devices, and you never had a BYOD policy. So yeah, those would come with changes, yeah. But generally, once you've gotten it right the first time, you can really just move on, yeah. So that's it for IT governance. If you have any questions, I know that we've really just rushed through it. Just please post it in the Q&A section and we'll respond as Christine hops onto the final section. We are out of time, but please pardon us and give us some extra 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Like Peter says, I'm just going to marathon through. Chapter Gay has nothing on me when it comes to running through this. Okay, so we'll just go quickly through auditing of cybersecurity. We will not go, it's just going to be very, very, very high level, and maybe in the ISACA quarterly sessions, they can take this to a deeper level. So we'll look at a cyber overview. What does the IT security look like, and what's the perspective at board level, risk assessment considerations when it comes to cybersecurity, what other additional considerations you should take into mind when you're auditing cybersecurity programs, and then just a few pointers on the aspect of cloud computing. We hope to finish this in the next 15. So a cybersecurity audit is designed to be a comprehensive review and analysis of businesses' IT infrastructure. A cybersecurity audit will help mitigate the consequences of a breach and demonstrate that the organization has taken necessary steps to protect client and company data. So usually they will have involvement of experts in the area of penetration testing, in the area of things to do with the IT security, whether it's at perimeter network, whether it's at operating system level, and they will have reports being communicated to management as to the status of affairs. Yeah. So ISTA 315 recognizes that IT poses a key risks to an entity's internal control. You have potential loss of data. You have unauthorized access. You've heard of hackers. You have risk associated with the use of digital technologies, personal devices, and media. And then the effect of that, of course, would be financial loss, disruption, and damage to the reputation of the company. If you know someone was a bank was hacked or something, you just want to get your money out. Yeah. So what does the IT entire security or organization look like? You have the outside physical security. You have the network security. You have internal network. Then you have the operating system. Then you have the application and the database. So what is the perspective at board level? So as high-profile cyber attacks have become more common, you probably had one in the last 1 year or something like that. Executive management teams and boards are deeply concerned. So they're asking questions like, is their business resilient to a cyber attack? Which threats should they be more concerned about? Could a cyber incident impact our business? And so it would be most definitely, are there gaps in our cybersecurity capabilities for controls that they already have in place? Is there more they could do to be safer? You can never be too safe. How much risk are they willing to take in? Like I said, you can't address risk 100%. There will always be a residual risk. Are we spending in the right areas? Yeah, so again, value for money. So according to PwC's 2017 CEO survey, they're saying 90% of top CEOs believe that stakeholder trust will be negatively impacted by cybersecurity breaches on business information or critical systems within the next 5 years. I mean, it's already happening. You have the stories. So what risk assessment considerations should you put in place when you're auditing your cybersecurity programs, or you're just looking at the area of cybersecurity to get some semblance of comfort? You have things like, has the entity identified cybersecurity as a risk? As part of this risk assessment, you may find that the client even doesn't know that cybersecurity risks and threats exist. Yeah. Do any of these risks impact relevant internal controls? What actions has the entity taken related to cybersecurity as a result of their risk assessment? So if they've included cybersecurity as part of their risk assessment, what have they done about it? What are the mitigation measures that are put in place? Does the entity have a risk-based security program leveraging on recognized standards such as ISO, which we looked at yesterday? And then we have the NIST framework. So if we look at the area of roles and responsibilities, you will ask questions like, has the entity established roles and responsibilities over cybersecurity? Who do they report to? Who is responsible? Yeah, is it a CISO, a CIO, a cybersecurity risk officer somewhere? Has cybersecurity been discussed among those charged with governance? Yeah, probably have to review the meeting minutes or something. If yes, if the conversations are happening at that level, has the entity then taken any action as results of as outcome of those, sorry about that, as an outcome of those discussions? We will go to safeguarding assets. We've just broken them down into these areas to just give you some sort of visibility for a plan of attack. Yeah, when you're going to do your high-level auditing. Are there any material, digital, electronic assets on the balance sheet that are subject to cybersecurity risk? This is most definitely going to be for someone who is performing an audit support for a financial audit. So for someone who is in the industry or who is part of the internal audit environment, You also have to look at things like intellectual property rights, patents, copyrighted material, trade secrets, and so on. So if you've identified those material, digital, electronic assets, what is management's process for identifying these assets, prioritizing their protection based on the criticality? How does management monitor whether there's been unauthorized access to electronic assets and the impact on financial reporting? Yeah. And then you have security breaches. Does the entity have mechanism designed and implemented to detect anomalous activities or cyber or security incidents? Has the entity been subject to a material cybersecurity incident or data breach before? Because if something has been done before, then there should have been some sort of mitigation procedure taken to ensure that it doesn't reoccur. So if yes, what was the nature of this incident? Did this attack impact financially significant systems or critical systems to the operations of the business? Does the entity have cybersecurity incident response plan in place? So that will summarize the key questions that you will have to ask. Like I say, this is just a high level overview, and probably for more sessions, you may have to consider that with ISACA. So the core focus areas may include, when you're looking at cybersecurity, things like effectiveness of the cybersecurity governance and oversight, protection of networks and customer information. Is there identification and assessment of cybersecurity risks and threats? Are cybersecurity risks being managed properly for those that have integration with vendors or third parties? Are there maybe onboarding procedures for third parties to ensure that those risks are addressed? The risks are monitored on an ongoing basis, and assessments are conducted to update those risk assessments. Do they have detection and prevention of unauthorized activity? Do they have controls in relation to response to data breaches and minimization of business disruption? So these are the key focus areas that you have to keep in mind when you're auditing cybersecurity programs. So cybersecurity, again, we mentioned it's a priority because it's becoming more and more common. Attacks, I've had for some of my clients. So it should be a continuous improvement of frameworks and networks. So what you did last year shouldn't be what you do this year, because people are getting more intelligent, systems are becoming more sophisticated. So the entities have to improve their frameworks, their standards, their internal controls related to addressing cybersecurity risk. So the additional cybersecurity considerations like roles and responsibilities that have been assigned, I already mentioned that. What policies and procedures do they have in place in regards to cybersecurity? Are their access controls effective enough? Do they have them in place anyway? Is there training conducted for business users, and some sort of alerts that are given to say, this is what is happening. Be careful in case there is some phishing emails that are going on or something like that. So what is their policy in relation to security breaches and reporting incidents? Do they have authentication procedures in place? What control have they taken in relation to attacks like denial of service? Do they perform backups like we already mentioned? Maybe things like real-time replication of data. What considerations have they put in place in relation to remote access? Yeah. Are there detection controls? Maybe they have intrusion detection systems in place. What is the reliability of their incident detection in case they have those procedures in place? Do they perform penetration tests, and vulnerability scans. So probably they would involve some sort of experts in this area to give them that independent view that, you know, to assess the gaps or to point out the areas where they need to improve or tighten their security. So, so not all points of focus are relevant to every entity. You will have to tailor these control points. You have to tailor these considerations depending on the kind of risk factors that the business that you're auditing may be facing. Okay, let's quickly run through cloud computing. This is just a general term used for a class of networks. It's basically set up on a utility compute. It's a step from utility computing, and then it's just a collection or a group of integrated and networked hardware, and it uses internet for communication and so on and so forth. Let me just rush to common observations when auditing cloud computing. Yeah, so you find for most environments where they use cloud computing, there are issues to do with password settings for cloud resources that do not comply with organization password policies, port setting cloud servers instances not being appropriately configured. You have terminated users found to be active on applications in the cloud, and there is no IP range restriction. Employees transferred out of a certain department had access to cloud resources, even though they transferred to another department a few days ago or a few months ago. This will probably create segregation of duties conflicts, because maybe you are entering transactions. Now in your new department, you are approving transactions. So now you have end-to-end. You can choose to do everything with that access. So you have issues to do with service providers, SOC report not reviewed for impact to user organizations. So most times organizations will outsource this service to cloud service providers, and then there will maybe request independent auditors to go and audit the environment of this user organization. Or the user organization may have the choice to select their independent auditor, who will then produce a report of assurance to say, these are the controls we have surrounding your data that you've entrusted with us, and we are telling you that everything is okay, or these are the gaps that we're looking to address. So usually you'll find that the report is there, but they're not being reviewed, and impact to the user organization is not being analyzed. So you have issues to do with sensitive data in the cloud was found not to be encrypted. And then you have instances of generic accounts to administer the cloud. You don't know who is entering which account. You don't know who performed which transaction. You have no way of tracing which user entered. So that's the risk associated with shared accounts. So best practices, what kind of recommendations would you give to a client or to a business that makes use of cloud services or cloud computing? You would ensure that password settings for cloud resources comply. You'd ensure that port settings are appropriately configured. Basically, the opposite of everything that has been addressed, that has been pointed out in the previous slide. So what are they not doing? Identify those points. Then you come back and probably give an insight of what should they then take on to do. So I think that is all for today. I'm sorry I had to rush through this and just give you very, very, very high level. I'll just now hand over to Peter to make any additional comments in the area of cybersecurity.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christine, and apologies that we had to rush on these areas, but I think that there was a particular slide that really just brought everything together for me, which is what she called the key focus areas. And that is what I think that you as IT auditors have to bear in mind. The bits that relates to cyber governance, from just establishing that those that are charged with responsibility of governance do actually understand cyber risk, and they're able to challenge management to respond to those very difficult questions on whether or not the cybersecurity programs that exist within the organization is able to keep the organization secure. Aspects that has to do with the cyber risk assessment, and what is really required today is that it has to be as granular as possible, as opposed to just having a line in your risk assessment that says cyber risk. Yeah, it has to be as granular as possible to specifically indicate what cyber risk exists within your environment in relation to your computing environment. If you've got third-party integrations, the kind of risk that we would need to see in that risk assessment as an IT auditor will be obviously different from someone else who doesn't have any third-party integrations, or someone who is using a cloud service provider would have a different kind of risk profile. Yeah, but as an IT auditor, you want to establish that the risk assessment that has been performed by management or the risk department is robust, is sufficient. It does give full visibility of all the risks that the company or the organization is exposed to, and all the attack surface. I mean, the nature of the attack surface that exists, depending on the inventory of digital assets and the kind of integrations that exist. Yeah. And then as an IT auditor, still as part of governance, you want to be interested in now then the policies that should guide safe usage of all these digital assets. So it has to be really clear. I mean, if your organization uses BYOD, then you obviously have to have such kind of policies that mitigate cyber threats. You have to have clear policies for safe remote working. If you are doing that and you have all sorts of VPN connections in place, you have to definitely also be interested in policies that establish security awareness, given that phishing attacks, smishing attacks, phishing attacks these days is really the kind of entry points that cyber criminals are using. And then going away from the element of governance to then looking at the preventative programs and structures that the organization have in place, really just interrogating as an IT auditor to confirm and establish that there are effective programs and systems and practices to prevent a cyber breach. Yeah, whether it is how the firewalls are set up, or the cybersecurity awareness programs that are in place, and so on and so forth. But again, I mean, some of you may have heard that today it is really not about if you will be attacked or if there will be a breach, it's about when. Yeah. So when it does happen, yeah, as an IT auditor, do you have the assurance that the organization does have the programs in place to effectively and efficiently respond to that attack? So what does the incident response plan look like? For one of my clients, they had an attack on one of their channels, and they were offline for a week. Yeah. Is that consistent with the organization's real-time objective, or obviously not? Yeah. So as an auditor, you want to give the board audit committee that sort of assurance, whether or not the incidents program that is in place can actually enable the organization to safely and very effectively and very efficiently respond in the event of an attack. And that could look at the entire life cycle of how your organization is able to get intelligence on certain activities by cyber criminals right from the early stages, and not when they are already smiling to the bank. to the point where you then have to isolate the entry points and and recover accordingly. So in my mind, it is about the governance, it's about the preventative programs, it's about the detective programs, and it's about the corrective programs related to cybersecurity. Yeah, so that is really it. And apologies for extending beyond 17 minutes. And hopefully within the next 5 minutes that I would hand over to Bernard, if there are any pending questions in there, we'll be able to answer. Thank you. Bernard, over to you.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much, Christine. I think we need to give you a standing ovation wherever we are or whatever we can do. It's been an amazing 2 days. We can never have enough time to handle all this together, but I want to thank the PwC team for giving back to the community by offering this training free of charge. We are constrained by time and other resources, but we thank you so much for putting together whatever you could in this short time and allowing us to interact with you. We appreciate this collaboration and recognize you as champions of building the information security community in Uganda, in Africa, and the world over. So we really thank you so much, and we're grateful. So I will close by simply saying thank you. I will also recognize the board members that we have today. We have board members from ISACA Kampala. We have Mr. Kefa Tusubira, Certification Director. We have Mr. Moses Maloba, who is our treasurer. We have Samari Kachibale, who is our governance director and she leads liaison. And Mr. Joseph Mukisa, who is our director at large. We are going to have another session in November. We encourage you to keep connected to us on our social media channels so that the announcement will come to you and you'll be able to join in. The videos of this session and that of yesterday will be posted to the YouTube channel, our ISACA Kampala YouTube channel. I am reliably informed that yesterday's session is already on. We shall send you the presentation slides and a survey by email so that you're able to tell us how your experience was with the session and give us any feedback that you'd like us to have. I would also like to announce 2 events that are upcoming. We have a COVID 2019 Foundation Training and Exam Workshop that's coming up 9th to 11th September. We've unfortunately had to reschedule this, I think twice now because of the pandemic, but we believe that we have a very good chance to hold it on 9th and 11th September. So I encourage you to register. We shall share the email link, the registration link on the email that we send, but please watch out for that. And I encourage any one of you who has interest or any colleague who has interest, please come in and join us. We also have our annual conference that's coming up from 23rd to 24th September. It's going to be virtual. And this year, the theme is going to be rethinking value and technology assurance in the workspace. We have been holding these conferences for 9 years now. This will be our 10th year. And we look forward to an exciting mix of presentations and learning and other activities. I will now invite our board secretary, Rita, to close for us on behalf of the board. Thank you so much. Rita, over to you.
Thank you, Bernard. Good evening once again, women across the globe. It's indeed my great pleasure that you had a fruitful training within these 2 days. And one of the main objectives for this training was to enhance the skills of the IT audit professionals and the entire audit profession at large. And I believe each of you have key takeaways in what has been discussed.
Rita, are you there? Seems to have
Hello.
frozen.
Yes, I am.
All right, over to you, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, thank you once again, Bernard. Yes, good evening. It's my great pleasure that you had a fruitful training within these 2 days. And one of the main objectives for this training was to enhance the skills of the IT audit professionals and the entire audit profession at large. And I believe right now that each of you have your key takeaways in what has been discussed. And I'm confident that you'll have a valuable outcome after today. And first and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to the speakers and the panelists for their valuable contribution to this training. I would request all the panelists to turn on their videos. Kefa, Jime, the communications director, Maral, the marketing director, please turn on your videos such that the members can be able to recognize you. And I would also like to express my deep thanks to all our delegates from across the globe who have managed to attend, especially those who have made it for the 2 days. My deepest gratitude to all of you. And I believe this training has provided useful insights and lessons learned. You'll be able to implement what you have learned in your respective workplaces. Finally, my deepest thanks, of course, are reserved for the PwC team, the board and management of ISACA Kampala chapter for their priceless contribution and for running a smooth event. Thank you very much for this incredible arrangement. Thank you very much. They said that don't cry because it's over, but smile because it has happened. It's over today, but smile because it took place. I like Mark Twain, who says that the secret of getting ahead is getting started. Indeed, we have started. We are coming back in November. Just keep on the watch. We are coming back this time in another my remarks and officially announce that training closed. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.